Welcome to the Founder Experience, where we're charting the unpredictable waters of startup ventures. I'm Nathan Williams.
And I'm Alex Gutjahr. So did I ever tell you the story about one of the startups we incorporated as part of our agency business? The one where we had like Uber for parcels?
No.
Okay.
What was it called?
We'll get to that. Let me start with so the idea was when you would go somewhere with your car, right? Meeting your parents, going back to university, whatever, you usually have a lot of space in your trunk. And we had the idea that you could
ride sharing for parcels.
Yeah. That's it. So you could rent out that space if you're going anywhere, anyway, then you could rent out the space and then deliver parcels. So we thought about this being a nice idea. And now I think there are companies out there doing this as well. But we started thinking hard about a name. And we arrived at Ship It. So because you ship something, Ship It sounds very catchy. So that was the initial idea.
.it domain name.
Yeah,
right?
that's Italy, right? Ship.it. So, but now here's a catch. SHIP was taken, so we couldn't. So it wasn't ship. So we tried to change the name. So the final name was Ship, spelled SHYPP .it. So more like Shipe It. So and we thought that would be a great name, and because you could still tell someone the name and they would get the idea. Ship it, right? You ship a parcel. But then we went to Web Summit Dublin to exhibit there for this very startup. And then a guy approached me and he started talking and he was like, I've heard so many good things and I'm still looking for investors. And he keeps talking. I was like, how the hell does this guy even know us? And then he started saying, so I think the first time I heard about you guys was from Tim Ferriss, because he's also an investor, isn't he? And I was like, oh, I see where this is going. Because it turns out there was a company that I think has now closed that was also called Ship, SHYP, but just one P, not two. So this guy thought you must be the Tim Ferriss startup, and he was so happy. And I at some point I had to break it to him and tell him, look, we're just starting out, and he was like, okay, never mind, and it just left. So the moral of the story is you should really think hard about the name, and I have a few more thoughts what's interesting or important to pay attention to. But I just wonder, like, do you have any names that you now in hindsight wouldn't give your startups today?
Well, that's a funny approach, and I have a story about this, right? So my company is called MindSpider, right? And people often ask, that's a very unique name. Where did you come up with it? Well, in 2017, when we started, here's what we were thinking. Okay, it's blockchain, it's circular economy, it's recycling, it's trust, and so as a result, we can't take any of the obvious names. It can't be like, we had to be totally hipsters about the name. So I said, no trust, no trace, no ledger, no crypto, no link, no chain, no circle, no sphere.
Oh boy.
Right? And so every one of the big ones. And it's funny, my competitors all are using circle, sphere, chain, trust, link, trace, like all of that. And it's very easy to confuse their names, to be honest. What I did, at the time, there was actually a naming trend going on of having an animal and what the animal was doing. So SurveyMonkey, TaskRabbit, MailChimp, right? So I was like, well, what about Spider? The reason I came up with Spider is that it crawls the web looking for information. And Spider is also the name for like a robot that does that, like a web scraper robot.
Yep.
And this was for mines, because we were doing mining, and but not Bitcoin mining. It was like physical mines, like mines and metals. So that's where it came from, MindSpider. And at first, it was a different enough name that people had a negative reaction to it, actually.
Oh,
so
really?
People were like, that's a creepy name. Like, why would you take this creepy name? But the thing is, eventually people get used to it, right? and so you can't really be put off by the initial reaction, because people's initial reaction to something that's new is the same as the reaction to something they don't like. And
Hmm.
this leads into a whole theory I have about acquired tastes. We'll talk about this sometime, but but this is a proven fact that there are some things that people just get used to over time,
Yes.
and naming is one of them.
I think this is also one of the important learnings that I had, that the name is not as relevant as you might think, right? Because I can imagine many people starting out and thinking hard about what should be the name. How can you even make sure it's unique from what's out there? And I have a very strong preference for short, memorable names today. So when I think about something for a company, etc., I like it to be very short. And what, just coming back to my previous example, if you tell someone the name, they have to be able to write it down, right? If I tell you,
Mm.
look, my company's name is Mind Spider, you would be able to write it down. But ship it, the way we wrote it, I have to spell it. So people like this is really annoying, especially if you're around people and they ask you about it, and you just are able to tell them the name. They will not take the time necessarily to write it down, and they forget about you if they can't find you. So I would just make sure that you when you tell someone the name, they'd be able to write it down and get it right. And it's not as important as you think, because people, as you said, people get used to it. And then the more relevant question is, how do you establish the brand over time? What do people associate with it, and not so much the name that you started with?
That's very true. Although I will say, Mind Spider, the number one thing that people who have not heard of my company before will mistake it for is Mind Spider, and they
Oh,
will
really?
they will. It's very common for them to misspell it with a M-I-N-D, and so and you don't. It's hard to think of all of this in advance, right?
Yes.
It's hard to think about this in advance, but you're right. It's a lot about the brand. Some things are easier to brand than others, but the important thing is to have something that sticks in people's minds. There was a naming fad that went on for a while, maybe about 8 or 9 years ago, that I really didn't like, which was taking a bunch of vowel sounds and putting it together. So I think they were trying to go after sort of the Google type of name. So I knew, like, there was companies called Uvu or Wovo or Bubo, or
Hmm.
they were awful, because they didn't have any words associated with them. They were sounds, and they were all vowel sounds, and so it
Yeah.
was really hard to distinguish them from each other. I just don't like that. I'll give you an example. This is an example I love to think about. When you're talking about the name, this is the brand of your company, and it doesn't have to have a meaning at the beginning, but it is eventually going to be the number one thing people think about your brand. Now, if you think about the importance of how to establish this type of brand for your name or your company and attach meaning to that name, I like to take an example from a completely different field. If I was to ask you, name a famous scientist, who would you name?
Einstein.
Einstein. There's two that come to mind for most people, either Einstein or Hawking, Stephen
Hmm.
Hawking.
Yeah.
Both of them became famous in their field for something that was very, very specific that other people wouldn't understand. Einstein was famous for relativity, Hawking was famous for black holes. Okay. But the reason everyone else knows of them was because Einstein had crazy hair
Yeah.
and Hawking had a robot voice and a wheelchair.
Hmm.
And so they became known as smart science guy because they had this visual hook that allowed people to remember them. The average person doesn't know Hawking was famous for black holes or that Einstein was famous for relativity. Maybe a little bit. They'll know E equals MC squared, but they won't know what that means.
Hmm.
But they'll know because they had this hook that said, okay, super relevant science guy who is relevant within his field suddenly has something that I can relate to, which is crazy hair.
And
And this is the importance of having a hook where people can remember that name.
And this can come later, right? Because I've seen this also with companies that I've worked with. Usually the like also my impulse would be to, okay, we need a story, and that needs to come up into a name, and that has to represent the story. And today I think just pick a name, and
Mm.
then attach the story later, right? Because then, and usually you can even do this with AI these days, right? You say, this is the name. What stories could we come up with? How does that relate to what we're doing or what our values are? And I think this is again this way it makes much more sense for me these days. Just do it the other way around. Don't overthink it. Get started and see how you attach meaning. A story. How does it relate to yourself or the company that it represents? And then do this later. And then people will remember it for the name it is. And just the one. And Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm not sure how familiar you are with him or what do you
Oh,
think about
Gary
him.
V. Yeah.
Yeah, but he has. I think he said it at some point. That he has the most awkward name or strange name, and then he still created a brand around it, right? So he said, "Yeah, try creating a brand with the name Vaynerchuk." So and it still works. So
Well, everything hinges on what people remember you for. I mean, look at what's the most famous AI?
ChatGPT, I would
Yeah,
assume.
it's not Grok.
No.
It's not Claude. It's Chat GPT, the most awkward name that you can
Yes.
imagine. But it made huge waves, and so people will remember it forever. It broke all the names of naming. Another question: have you seen the movie? It's a '90s movie. That Thing You Do, Tom Hanks movie.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, go watch it. It's a movie about a one-hit wonder band. It's
Hmm.
like a band that becomes very famous, and they wanted to call themselves the Wonders, but they wanted to spell it differently so that it wouldn't just be so that, like the Beatles, they wanted to spell it differently so people would remember it. The Beatles are not spelled like the insect; they're spelled BEAT, like the beat music
Hmm.
of the time. And they said, "Well, we'll be the Wonders, but we'll spell it ONEDERS." And everyone started calling them the Oneaters. And when they became famous in the movie, when they started to get a hit, they got signed to a big record label with Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks said, very first thing, we're changing your name to the Wonders, WONDERS. It's way too confusing.
Yeah. No, that's.
And, but this is it, is that we want to be unique, but what's more important than being unique is being memorable.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's funny you brought up the vowel trend a few years back because one of our first products that we had was a tool where companies could manage freelancers and projects, and we called it Tweezer. And this is another trend I think that stood around to some degrees.
I don't like
We
that name, actually.
Yeah, it was fun, but we removed the last vowel, so it was Tweezer. And there's again, you'll find product names out there
Oh, like
today with.
Flickr or Imgur
Yes,
or like, yeah.
exactly. And I think this is also not a good name. I mean, if you have the size of Flickr, then probably you made it. But if you're starting out and you have a name such a, because you have to spell it for people to get it. And again, just avoid that. Just have something that people get immediately and don't confuse.
Yeah, yeah. These name fads though can work, right? Because as long as someone else has done it, then you can just say like this name and point to them, right? Like, um, and it'll be a little bit easier for people to get it. Like if you're the first one to make Flickr without the last e, then yeah, it might be a little bit awkward. You better have a good product to back it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. With I don't know. Naming is my favorite part of building a startup. To be honest, it's I some people love it, some people hate it. I love it. I love coming up with a new name that's kind of clever, because it means that I don't have to think about all the hard stuff I have to do with the product. I can do the fun thing.
Yeah, my preference for that is these days, as I said, is getting for a very short name. So I don't like long names for some reason. I just want to. I love back a few like many years back at this point. Kevin Rose had a product and it was called Milk, or even the company name I'm not sure, but something like that. And it's really rare these days to find something like this because usually, and you know this, I'm also looking for a domain name, right? Because you have to be visible, and I don't like these domain names that look like the primary domain was taken with a try or get or whatever, not the
Mm,
subdomain, right, but the top level domain. So and this is getting even harder, right? There are new top level domains coming up, so you have to be fast, and you could get one of those. But this is also something where I think about new products or company names. Really, just get something short and sweet, where you also can get the top level domain. And it doesn't make sense for everyone. I get that, but that's my thing.
The one thing you always have to be careful of when you're building your company name is to make sure it also works as a domain name. And there's the classic example of, if you smush words together, does it accidentally make a word in the middle?
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's why we named this podcast the Founder Exchange and
Yes.
not the Founders Exchange, because then it would
Yes.
be Founder Sex Change, right? So
Exactly. And this we discussed lengthy, right? That's easy
length.
to get wrong. Yes, because this is the worst thing that can happen. It looks nice on paper. You just see it the way you want to see it, and then you put it together all lowercase, and someone's reading that and thinking, "What the hell is that?" So that's good to also double check if you come up with lengthy names.
The other big thing that you should also do is, people over focus on the URL. You can
Mhm.
call your company something and have a different URL. I'm actually okay with that. The bigger issue is all the other handles. So the LinkedIn handle, the Facebook, the Twitter, the Blue Sky, wherever you're going on socials, right? Instagram, make sure that you've got access to all of that. Um, because like you can always change the domain name a little. I know that you don't like, the idea of a getdomain.com, right? But you can
Yes.
always do like what Steam did, like Steam powered to
Yes.
whatever powered, right? Like I actually prefer, if you're going to go with a longer domain, to add a word to the end as opposed to the beginning. If you add a word to the beginning, then people will make a mistake typing in your name. So if your startup was, I don't know, touch grass or something, right? Then, and if you have get touch grass, then they're going to make a mistake and go to the
Yes.
wrong website. Whereas if you do touch grass powered, then they'll start typing it in and they'll eventually get to the right site when in Google or whatever.
Yeah, or similar to how Tesla started, right? I think these days they have Tesla.com. I think they started with TeslaMotors.com, which is then
Yeah.
also more memorable than having something mixed up in between.
Yeah. I would always err on the side of mess up the end of the domain rather than the beginning.
That's it for this episode of The Founder Experience. If you enjoyed it, do us a favor, hit subscribe wherever you are listening, whether that's Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. If you've got a second, leave a rating or a review. It really helps. And you can find more episodes and behind-the-scenes stuff on our website, founderexperience.fm. And if you've got feedback or business ideas that you want us to talk about, shoot us a message at hello@founderexperience.fm. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you next time.